Ice cream, the air-infused empire of phase transitions. Ice cream is the baseline of the frozen world, yet it represents a sophisticated, often misunderstood paradox of thermodynamics that dictates our entire perception of cold. At its core, ice cream is a complex, engineered foam, a delicate, invisible matrix of fat globules, air bubbles, and microscopic ice crystals, all suspended within a sweetened liquid base. The defining characteristic that dictates whether you are eating a mediocre, airy supermarket tub or a dense, luxury artisan pint is known as overrun. This is the technical measurement of the volume of air whipped into the base during the high-speed freezing process. In mass-market industrial production, manufacturers often force up to 100% overrun, meaning your bowl is essentially half air, designed by corporate chemists to melt instantly and vanish on the tongue, leaving your palate yearning for more. Conversely, super premium ice creams are meticulously engineered with as little as 20% to 30% overrun. This low-air, high-density structure is what triggers that deep, subconscious feeling of heaviness or luxury. But there is a dangerous, persistent enemy lurking in your home freezer: the recrystallization of water. As temperature fluctuates, small ice crystals melt and refreeze into jagged, larger, and harsher structures, turning your silky, luscious cream into a gritty, icy disappointment. Food scientists combat this using stabilizers, locust bean gum or guar gum that physically cage water molecules, preventing them from migrating and clumping together over time. It is an ongoing, high-stakes chemical battle against entropy, keeping the ice cream in a state of perfectly suspended animation until the exact moment it hits your tongue. The perfect scoop isn't just cold. It's a perfectly maintained structural equilibrium that demands total precision. The complexity lies in the fact that you are consuming a structure that is constantly trying to collapse back into its constituent parts, fighting against the natural desire of water to form larger, unpalatable ice structures. 2. Gelato, the low-fat paradox of serving temperature. If ice cream is the loud, aerated, and impulsive foam of the dessert world, gelato is its refined, brooding, and deeply focused artisan. There is a persistent, misguided myth circulating that gelato is simply healthier because it contains less fat, but that is a superficial reading of a complex engineering feat. Gelato is churned at a significantly lower speed than ice cream. This minimal agitation prevents the forced incorporation of excess air, resulting in a product that is denser, silkier, and far more concentrated in its flavor delivery. However, the real secret to the legendary gelato experience isn't just the churn. It's the physics of the serving temperature. Gelato is held and served at roughly 10 to 15 degrees warmer than traditional American-style ice cream. This is critical because our human taste buds are incredibly temperature-sensitive. At lower, freezing temperatures, the perception of sweetness and nuanced flavor compounds is significantly dampened. By serving gelato at a higher, warmer temperature, the flavor molecules are released to your palate almost immediately upon contact. The fat content is intentionally lower not just for health, but to ensure that the heavy mouth-coating sensation of butterfat doesn't mask the primary vibrant flavors of the fruit or nuts. It is a dessert designed for immediate sensory gratification, providing an intense, unapologetic punch of flavor rather than the lingering, slow-burn creaminess of its butterfat-heavy cousin. It is an exercise in culinary restraint, focusing on the sheer quality of the raw ingredients rather than the volume of incorporated air, making it a masterclass in direct, honest flavor expression. Every bite is an intentional, calculated delivery system for flavor, engineered to bypass the numbing effects of extreme cold, ensuring that the essence of the ingredient remains the protagonist of the experience. 3. Sorbet, the purest distillation of sugar geometry. Sorbet is the minimalist's manifesto, a dessert that strips away every distraction. It contains absolutely no dairy, which removes the buffering effect of milk proteins and fats, leaving behind a highly controlled solution of sugar, water, and fruit aromatics frozen into a crystalline structure. Without fat to soften the bite, the master baker must rely entirely on the precise concentration of sugar to control the freezing point. Think of sugar as an anti-freeze. It interferes with the water molecule's ability to bond into a solid, impenetrable block of ice. If your bricks level the scientific measurement of sugar concentration is too low, the sorbet becomes a tooth-breaking, unyielding slab of ice. Too high, and it never truly sets, remaining a slushy, syrupy mess. Creating a perfect, stable sorbet requires a refractometer to calibrate the sugar-to-water ratio to the decimal point. It is the ultimate, unforgiving test of an ingredient's integrity. Because there is no cream to mask imbalances, the quality of the fruit is laid bare and exposed. It is the closest humanity has come to capturing the very soul of a fruit and pinning it down in a state of frozen perfection. It doesn't just taste like the fruit. It is the fruit, reconstructed as a cold, crystalline architecture. It is an unforgiving dessert that demands perfect, peak-season sourcing, as there is nowhere for a mediocre, out-of-season ingredient to hide within the crystalline lattice. The beauty here is in the transparency. There is no fat to coat the tongue, which means the aromatic compounds of the fruit hit the olfactory sensors directly, providing a clean, bright intensity that ice cream simply cannot replicate, turning the eating process into a pure, concentrated dialogue with the raw material itself. 4. Frozen yogurt, the acidic pivot and protein coagulation. Frozen yogurt, or froyo, is frequently misunderstood as a simple health food, but its true, hidden appeal lies in its unique, transformative biological composition. The signature tang is the result of a chemical transformation, lactobacillus bacteria consuming lactose and excreting lactic acid. This acidity fundamentally alters the physics of the mix. In a traditional ice cream base, the primary structure comes from milk fat and casein proteins. In froyo, the lactic acid alters the protein structures, causing them to behave in a stretchy or gel-like fashion when frozen. This is why high-quality frozen yogurt has a distinct, almost elastic mouthfeel that you simply won't find in a standard cream-based dessert. While modern commercial froyo has been heavily modified with stabilizers and massive amounts of sugar to cater to the mass market, the original, artisanal version is a study in structural tension. The sharp, acidic punch of the yogurt serves to clean the palate after every single bite, effectively preventing the sugary, fatty fatigue that usually sets in halfway through a bowl of heavy ice cream. It is a dessert of contrasts, balancing the heavy, comforting richness of dairy with the bright, aggressive spark of fermentation. It is this specific, calibrated pH level that defines the clean finish, distinguishing it from the heavy, lingering aftertaste of traditional churned products. It is the physics of acidity working against the physics of fat, creating a sensory environment where the sugar doesn't just sit on the tongue, but is cut through by the sharp, refreshing edge of the fermentation, ensuring each spoonful feels as lively and light as the first. 5. Kulfi, the unchurned masterpiece of caramelization. Kulfi is a direct, defiant challenge to everything modern Western food science tells us about frozen treats. While we obsess over mechanical churning to introduce air for a light texture, Kulfi is the product of absolute, uncompromising reduction. Originating in the royal kitchens of the Mughal Empire, it is made by taking whole milk and simmering it for hours, sometimes an entire day. As the water evaporates, the milk solids, specifically the proteins and sugars, undergo the intense Maillard reaction. This caramelization transforms the milk from a pale white liquid into a tan, nutty, deeply savory substance known as koa. Because Kulfi is never mechanically churned, it lacks the airy structure of ice cream, resulting in a density that borders on the solid. It melts with a deliberate, agonizing, and beautiful slowness, releasing waves of toasted sugar and concentrated dairy notes. It is a dessert of profound patience. While ice cream is a product of modern industrial efficiency, Kulfi is a relic of pre-industrial endurance. It doesn't rely on machines. It relies on the relentless application of heat to concentrate flavors until they reach an almost fudge-like intensity. It is the antithesis of the fast melt culture, designed to be savored in small, dense bites that pack the caloric and flavorful impact of a much larger portion. It is a slow-motion explosion of flavor that refuses to be rushed. The texture isn't about air or fluff. It is about the concentration of solid matter. Every bite offers a complex, multi-layered profile of toasted, nutty dairy sugars that have been refined by time, providing a sensory experience that feels closer to an intense, frozen candy than a standard dairy scoop. 6. Mochi ice cream, the architecture of textural contrast. Mochi ice cream is an exercise in haptic dining. The experience of the mouthfeel is just as important as the flavor itself. The outer shell is composed of mochiko, a sweet, glutinous rice flour that is steamed and pounded into a stretchy, resilient, and slightly resistant dough. This isn't just a container. It is a vital thermal and textural insulator. The brilliance lies in the protective barrier the mochi creates. It shields the ice cream from the harsh, dry, circulating air of the freezer, which would otherwise ruin the texture through the process of sublimation. When you take a bite, you encounter the initial, firm resistance of the chewy, elastic dough, which then gives way to the sudden, cooling collapse of the creamy center. This transition from a firm, masticatory challenge to an immediate, liquid melt is exactly what makes it so addictive to the human brain. It forces the diner to slow down. You cannot mindlessly consume mochi. You must engage with the texture, alternating between the earthiness of the rice and the intense cold of the dairy. It is a masterclass in contrasting states of matter. The mochi dough provides a structural foundation that allows for a softer, slightly more delicate ice cream interior than would be possible if it were exposed directly to the elements, creating a dual-layered sensory experience. It is a calculated, structural engagement that forces the consumer to participate in the act of eating, breaking down the barriers between the chewy exterior and the melting interior, rewarding the effort of the chew with a sudden, luxurious release of temperature and sweetness. 7. Popsicle, the physics of nucleation and heat transfer. The humble popsicle is often dismissed as a simple childhood relic, but it is actually a triumphant demonstration of fluid dynamics and heat transfer. The fundamental challenge of the ice pop is nucleation, the process by which water molecules organize themselves into crystals. If a popsicle is frozen in a standard home freezer, the temperature drops slowly. This allows the ice crystals to grow into large, jagged, blade-like needles that can be unpleasant and even painful to eat. Commercial manufacturers use flash freezing to force the water to crystallize almost instantaneously into millions of microscopic, uniform needles, which gives the pop its smooth, biteable texture. The stick itself is an unsung hero of engineering. By using wood, an excellent natural thermal insulator, the stick prevents the ambient heat from your hand from traveling into the frozen structure. If the stick were made of metal, the pop would melt from the center outward, structural integrity failing as you ate. It is a masterpiece of portable convenience, balancing freezing speed with insulating properties to survive the journey from freezer to hand. It is the ultimate expression of how structural geometry and material science can dictate the success of a simple, frozen sugar solution, keeping the cold contained until the very last bite. The precision here is entirely about how quickly you can lock the water structure into place before the crystals can grow, turning a simple liquid into a uniform, edible solid that doesn't just melt away, but holds its own form under the constant pressure of a warm environment. Granita, the crystalline geometry of human intervention. If sorbet is a smooth, predictable block, granita is its wild, unrefined, and infinitely more interesting ancestor. Hailing from Sicily, granita is the ultimate proof that sometimes the best kitchen tool is a human hand and a fork. It is not churned by a machine. Instead, as the sweetened liquid base freezes, a person must periodically scrape it with a fork to break up the ice crystals as they begin to bind together. This process results in a texture that is porous, flaky, and exceptionally light. Because the ice crystals are large and separated by pockets of air, they don't form a solid mass. They sit in your mouth like a coarse, sweet snow. You aren't just experiencing flavor, you are experiencing pure geometry. The crunch of the granita is essential to the experience. Every bite is an auditory and tactile event. It is the most raw way to eat frozen sugar because it celebrates the transition from liquid to solid without trying to smooth over the rough edges. It is a dessert that demands your undivided attention, as it must be broken down by hand to achieve its signature, refreshing state. It's an interactive, manual process that results in a unique, jagged crystalline structure that is effectively impossible to replicate through industrial automation, turning the act of eating into an experience of shifting, melting ice. The beauty here is in the lack of consistency. Every bite is a new arrangement of ice, and the air pockets allow for a more dramatic release of flavor, creating a sensation that is as much about the physical destruction of the ice as it is about the taste, making the diner an active participant in the creation of the final texture. 9. Semifreddo. The half-frozen illusion of mousse. The name semifreddo translates to half-frozen. But this is a modest description for one of the most sophisticated frozen desserts in the Italian canon. It isn't churned like ice cream, which is a massive advantage in avoiding the unwanted freezer burn that haunts mass-produced, aerated dairy. Instead, it is built by folding whipped cream or egg whites into a rich custard or fruit puree. This trapped air, combined with the high fat content of the mousse base, creates a structure that never actually freezes into a solid rock, even at deep freeze temperatures. The molecular structure of the fat and air remains soft, almost velvet-like, providing a consistent texture that stays stable. It is the refined adult version of a frozen dessert, designed to be sliced with a sharp knife rather than scooped with a spoon. When you eat it, it doesn't melt in that thin, watery way ice cream does. It softens into a thick, luxurious cream that lingers on the palate. It is a high-wire act of chemistry, perfectly balancing fat, air, and sugar to maintain a permanent state of semi-solid perfection. The lack of constant agitation means the air bubbles remain large and stable, providing a loft and lightness that churned ice cream simply cannot achieve, creating a dessert that is as much about structural stability as it is about taste. It is an elegance that relies on the structural integrity of the proteins to hold the entire architecture together against the cold, resulting in a product that feels less like a frozen block and more like a captured, chilled moment of pure, decadent creaminess that manages to defy the freezing process itself. 10. Bingsu. The atmospheric engineering of shaved ice. Finally, we arrive at bingsu, the Korean pinnacle of shaved ice, which makes the snow cones of the West look like primitive ice grinding. The goal of bingsu is to mimic the density and mouthfeel of fresh, falling snow. The secret isn't just the blade, it's the specific liquid being frozen. Most high-end bingsu shops don't just use water, they use milk or condensed milk bases. When you freeze a liquid with fats and sugars, the ice crystals are inherently smaller and softer than they would be with pure water. When this milk block is shaved by a razor-sharp high-speed blade, it doesn't come off in shards. It comes off in microscopic, powdery, creamy ribbons. These millions of tiny flakes have an incredible surface area, allowing them to melt on your tongue almost the instant they make contact, releasing the flavor instantly. The toppings, red beans, rice cakes, toasted soybean powder, are merely anchors for the ice. The true transcendent experience is the structure of the ice itself, a delicate, ephemeral mountain of creamy particles that exist for only a few minutes before the reality of the room temperature forces the mountain to collapse into a sweet, milky pool. It is a race against time, a dessert that requires speed, focus, and appreciation for the temporary nature of its form. It isn't just a bowl of ice. It's a structural masterpiece that highlights the beauty of ephemeral, phase transition engineering. Every scoop is a new, fleeting landscape of temperature and texture that constantly challenges our perception of what a dessert can be in the modern age, proving that sometimes the most magnificent culinary structures are those that are designed specifically to vanish the moment they are created, leaving behind only the fleeting, cooling memory of their perfection.